Hello, I'm Dr. Thomas Kador, and I'm a lecturer in Creative Health at University College London. For today, I would like to tell you a little bit about the SWELS project, the Student Wellbeing and Experiential Learning Spaces project, which we carried out between 2020 and 2023. As a bit of a background to this project, I guess I should start with 10 years or so of research on the relationship between cultural heritage and well-being that we've been carrying out at UCL. Perhaps most famous for the museum's well-being umbrella, the well-being measure that we developed, as well as some pilot work on museums on prescription and social prescribing in museums. And we've been working with a broad range of audiences over those years, but curiously, we never, up until the point where we started SWELS, thought about applying those insights to our own community of colleagues and in particular of students at UCL. The other context of that is, of course, the severe mental health difficulties that many university students are experiencing, the crisis in mental health, as some people would call it. And here's just a chart from a relatively recent government publication that shows the 7-fold increase in mental health difficulties that university students have been reporting over the past decade. And this actually only charts the first academic year during COVID. So chances are things have gotten significantly worse even since then. So we thought, we know we have a community of students who are struggling in many places, and we have some of the answers that we have tested with lots of other participants and audiences. So we thought, why don't we look at how we can support students within our institutions? The other aspect to that is a relatively recent book that Helen Chatterjee and I have been working on the relationship between object-based learning and well-being. And in that, we had a small pilot working with our own students. The shift to SWELS, though, was about not just focusing specifically on objects, like we did with the book, but actually thinking about heritage spaces, museums and other heritage spaces more broadly. And with that, then we were successful in applying for a grant from UKRI and the Smarten Network in 2020 to explore that relationship between learning spaces on university campuses and student well-being. And just as we had submitted the application, the first lockdown was announced within a few weeks after that. So therefore, we had to really rejig our project and focus specifically on how students have been coping during the pandemic and then also after the lockdowns began to lift. So these are the partners for the SWELS project. So we've been working across 3 Southern English universities. That's King's College London, in particular with the dentistry faculty there, the GLAM, Gardens, Libraries and Museums at the University of Oxford, and ourselves at UCL. And here's just some of the key spaces, but just a small selection of some of the wonderful heritage spaces that these 3 universities have, which is an amazing asset. And this is really what we wanted to get to the bottom of. So our take on experiential learning spaces is that they are different from the standard classrooms that students usually encounter. And because of that difference, they help facilitate active and authentic learning engagement with the environment as well as in the spaces. And as an example, they can include venues such as the ones on the picture, so museums, libraries, gardens, but they could also include a range of other venues. But these are the ones that we focused on across these 3 universities. In terms of our research design for SWELS, it was a mixed methods approach. We had a quantitative section with a survey that we started with, and then the survey, the inductive survey, then helped us to structure the interview questions that we asked in the qualitative part. So that it was then followed by some qualitative interviews with a smaller number of participating students. And here are some of the overall headline figures, some of the demographics from the survey. 140 students across the 3 universities participated. As you can see, 2/3 of those are between 18 and 21, and another 14% nearly are between 22 and 24, meaning that 80% of our participants were under the age of 25. nearly 90% or nearly 87% at least of the participating students were undergraduate students. And so then it's under 20% different levels of postgraduate students. And they, as you can see, broke down with over half of the participating students in the survey were from King's College London, largely because the courses that we got to survey were much larger than at UCL and Oxford. And unsurprising, with the kind of work we were doing, over 3/4 of the participants were female, and just under half were white, largely white British, but also some white European students, and 35 Asian or Asian British, and then a small number, under 10%, Black and other minority ethnic students, as well as some students who didn't want to declare their ethnic background. The survey results, they confirmed some of our suspicions that university students are really struggling psychologically during their courses. And for this we use two measures. The one I'm presenting here today is the ONS4, so the ONS Wellbeing measures, because that allowed us to compare with the national average from the last census in 2021. So on these diagrams you can see in blue the national average figures for 16 to 25-year-olds, which maps very well with 80% of our participants, and in orange you see our SWELS survey participants. And the 4 questions: how satisfied are you with your life on the top left? To what extent do you feel that things you do are worthwhile on the top right? Bottom left, number 3, how happy did you feel yesterday? And number 4, which is the most striking, how anxious did you feel yesterday? So you can see on most charts there is a difference, but it's not very striking between the two cohorts. It seems that the SWELS participants are more in the extremes, which you see, for example, on the top right about the worthwhile. So SWELS participants felt their life was more worthwhile, but they also felt that on the low end, equally, there's a greater majority of SWELS participants who said their work wasn't worthwhile. So that's interesting here, and we see a little bit of that with some of the other questions. But what's really striking, I think, is how anxious did you feel yesterday, where we have very striking that the number of SWELS participants who didn't feel anxious at all yesterday is very low compared to the national average, and the ones that felt anxious is more than twice as high. So that's really striking. So the levels of anxiety within higher education among our students are really striking, and that's borne out from our survey as well. Then some more survey questions were focused around what it actually is that students do to support their well-being at university, and all of that happened with the shadow of COVID looming over them. So that needs to be taken into consideration. But as you can see, nearly 70% of the students found that going to museums or art galleries was helpful for their well-being, and 80% of students who expressed that they had high anxiety found that such exhibits were supporting their well-being. There was also, interestingly, a high engagement with those spaces among students who experienced higher anxiety. And this is about the timing of the survey, that 49% in 2021 say that they have been back to a museum since March 2020, since the first lockdown. But also students clearly expressed that their patterns of activities shifted more towards using outdoor spaces, as well as online activities during the COVID period, when many places obviously were closed. But it's also good to see that that students had started coming back to the indoor spaces like museums and galleries post the lockdowns. In terms of the qualitative research, we interviewed 15 students from across the 3 universities. You can see here the majority were from UCL, with smaller numbers from King's and Oxford. And again, a very high number of female participants here, 85%. And 43% were undergraduate, and a similar number were taught postgraduate participants. And then a few PhD students as well. And here's just one quote from one of those students. I'll just read that out. I definitely know regularly engaging with experiential learning has helped me, and I've never had a period of wellness that's lasted this long, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So very striking that students expressing the benefits of working in these spaces in an experiential way. And similarly, talking about the more experiential modules that brought students into gallery spaces, into museums, into outdoor spaces. Students expressed things like, without this module and the trips to the museum, I wouldn't have met people from the course. If nothing really was in person, and that's during the COVID lockdowns, I was able to make friends regardless of the pandemic through this module, because we continued, and this is largely from our colleagues in King's as well, they continued the outdoor engagements when indoor opportunities were very limited at the time. And a university experience should be a holistic experience. You should be able to engage with things outside of you and get the spirit of a place. So anything which encourages you to explore places like the Ashmolean, the Pitt Rivers, or the Natural History Museum. And then finally, in terms of the outdoors engagement in particular, I really enjoyed having the green space timetabled for us, as it is really great for mental health and allows a fun break from studying when the course is getting intense. So students clearly expressing those benefits of being outdoors as part of the curriculum. And I think that's a really important aspect, that these were not extracurricular activities largely. These were activities that took place as part of the timetabled sessions, which is about us as university educators demonstrating that we value the spaces and the activities, and giving students permission to value them as well, and not say you need to do this in your own time. We know these going to museums, doing things outdoors is good for you, but do it in your own time, and the real learning is different. Building that into the curriculum has been really an important part, and the students with the interviews confirmed that very strongly. So then, just to summarize, that our quantitative results clearly confirmed that those national trends that we have seen at the very start with the background, that student mental health is worse than the national average for 18 to 25-year-olds. But the interviews also offered us some vital insights into the importance of utilizing campus and off-campus heritage spaces as outlets to support student well-being. So then essentially heritage spaces both on and off the campus have that potential to act as, if you want to use that terminology, community assets to support the well-being of both students and staff at universities. But interestingly, to date, not very much work has been done on this, looking at campus spaces, and especially old universities like UCL, Oxford or King's. We have a vast range of these really interesting, exciting, awe-inspiring spaces, but very little work has been done on the benefit they could potentially bring if they're utilized in a constructive way to both staff and student. But also in the wider landscape of the research on cultural heritage and well-being, these groups, students, staff at universities, despite the fact that a huge number of young people go to university, but these groups have been largely neglected in that research to date. So that's something we should do some more focusing on. And speaking of, we have so far published one paper based on the research on SWELS in the International Review of Psychiatry, which is open access, which you can download with that DOI. And I'm very happy to share that link, which just brings me on to the final slide to say thank you to you for listening, and also to say thank you to all my collaborators, and first of all the funders, I guess, to the Smart and Student Mental Health Network, and some people there in particular, as well as my collaborators from King's College and the University of Oxford and UCL. And perhaps most importantly, all the participating students who, from across those three universities have given up their time to work with us and to inform our work, which has been so insightful and so useful. Thank you to you for listening, and if you would like to get in touch, here are my details, my email address and my Twitter or X handle. So feel free to drop me a line, and yeah, thanks again so much for listening. And if you are in Northampton at the moment, then enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.